What the heck is TDS? What can it actually tell you? How can you use it to your advantage? And what does it definitely not help with? When we first started this hobby, we heard about this TDS thing, but many of us never really understood it. That, or there were just other things to worry about, like keeping our new fish alive in our new tank. As usual, we're gonna get straight to it. Let's go. Real quick, if you're new here, my name is Kev and I try to make helpful and entertaining aquarium content, so consider subscribing. TDS stands for Total Dissolved Solids and it's usually tested with a simple TDS meter. I have this cheap one that I got off Amazon. It doesn't even have a brand on it, but I'll link it in the description below. Now, Total Dissolved Solids is just a fancy way of saying here's a number representing everything that has dissolved into your water column. And when I say everything, I mean everything, both organic and inorganic dissolved ions like calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium, iron, chloride, sulfate, carbon, fluoride, phosphate, silicates, heavy metals like lead and copper, organics like uneaten food, fish poop, and decaying dead plants or fish, just to name a few. And the big one that we're actually going to be able to utilize for our benefit, nitrates. Oh yeah. Now, before we get into how that will benefit us, let me first address the common folk that have been taught to fear the word chemicals being used in our aquariums. Chemicals like Prime or Safe, chemicals like Excel or Buffer, chemicals like Purigen or Matrix Carbon, they say, bro, you use so many chemicals, bro. That's not natural. You just want people to buy a bunch of product and fill their tanks with a bunch of chemicals. You should keep your tanks like all the rivers and lakes out there, bro. You know? Keep your tank like mine. Look how beautiful. Keep it like this, natural, like this. Yeah, because we're gonna compare rivers and lakes to a glass box. Anyway, as you can see from the previously mentioned, your source water can already contain a lot of these chemicals. But here's one that will really blow your mind. Water, you know, H2O, is also a chemical. Now, here's the thing about TDS. While it can tell you the total of all things dissolved in your water, it cannot tell you how much of each individual thing there is. If your source water starts out at, let's say, 100 parts per million TDS, you won't know what's in that 100 parts per million. Then let's say you have 50 or 60 big fish in the tank that like to poop a lot. You feed about twice a day, and during your water changes, you add Prime, a lot of Cichlid lake salt and Malawi buffer, and Cichlid trace, like I do every week to my African cichlid tank. You may end up with 400 or 500 parts per million of TDS. Let's see what I actually have. Before testing the tank, I want to give a quick shout out to TFH Magazine. They gave me a little spotlight interview in their January edition that is out now and available both on their website and anywhere you get your magazines from. It's the first time I've ever been featured in something as cool as our very own dedicated fish hobby magazine. This is a major accomplishment for me, so thank you, TFH. I appreciate it. I'll have a link for you to subscribe to the magazine down below. So here's my TDS meter. Simply dip it right into the water as such, and you'll see, hopefully, that it says I'm reading 505 parts per million. I'm getting that reading because I add a lot of chemicals to this African cichlid tank, because I've got to adjust my source water parameters to what they thrive in, meaning I've got to raise the pH, I've got to raise the hardness, so I've got to add Cichlid lake salt, Malawi buffer. All of that is going to raise my TDS in this tank. Now, does that mean that having 505 parts per million TDS is a bad thing? Maybe, maybe not. If 400 of those 505 was copper in my water, oh yeah, that would be bad. But that's my point, that you have to utilize the information a TDS reading gives you in the right way. Let's take a look at the discus tank real quick. In this tank, I only dose a weekly Cichlid trace and monthly alkaline buffer because sometimes the pH can drop dangerously low. Let's take a look at the TDS. We are reading for this tank, I've got 198. Hopefully you guys can see that. 198 TDS is what we're getting in the discus tank. Totally different from the African tank. Now, does that mean that the discus tank water is much cleaner or healthier than the African cichlid tank? Just because this one is 198 and that one was 505? Absolutely not. That's what I want you to understand about TDS. The number is meaningless on its own, but you can use it to measure the changes in TDS over time. Now we're getting somewhere. Like I mentioned earlier, TDS includes the nitrates that build up in your tank in between water changes. So I'm gonna show you exactly how to use that information to your benefit. As experienced hobbyists, most of us do our water changes and tank maintenance on a scheduled basis. Our tanks are mature and established. We've done all the testing a while ago, and we know that our tank needs weekly or bi-weekly or monthly water changes. Whatever it is that you do, we're on a schedule. For beginners though, or for new tank setups, talking to you guys that just got another tank, you guys should be testing your water regularly to first confirm that it has cycled, but also to see how fast your nitrates rise in that tank. This is how we know when it may be time for a water change. Whatever the trigger level is for you to do a water change, it is what it is. Most common in the hobby is 40 parts per million. Some people let it go higher before a water change and it works well for them, so be it. I personally reach between 40 and 80 parts per million on this African cichlid tank every week before my weekly water change. But here's a quick hack of how to use the TDS as a tool to determine when it's time for a water change. Start by testing the TDS in your tank when it's freshly clean. Just got done with a water change, you added whatever chemicals you regularly add. This is going to be our foundation, our base level TDS. Now for instructional purposes, let's just say you're like me and you do weekly water changes. So throughout the week, you want to manage the tank in the same way you normally would any other week. Feed the same food, feed the same amount of food. Don't go doing any filter cleanings in the middle of the week or anything crazy like that. Just keep everything as constant and consistent as possible. Now, at the end of the week, when it's water change time, do your nitrate test like you normally would and confirm that yes, you reached 40 or 60 or 80, whatever it is that you normally reach that triggers your water change. And now, test your TDS again. Your TDS will be higher than what you started with at the beginning of the week. Now, of course, this is due to the food, the poop, your fish breathing, everything going on in the tank, but it also includes the nitrates that were rising throughout the week. This water change day TDS reading you just got is what you can now use to trigger your water change. You can also use the difference between the end of the week and the beginning of the week to determine how much TDS rises in that weekly time frame. Start with 200 and end with 300, then you know that you and your fish and your regimen are adding about 100 TDS every week. Here's the moral of the story. If you've determined how much TDS rises in any standard week, no matter what baseline you start with, because sometimes your source water can change, you'll know what TDS to expect at the end of the week, which should be your water change trigger. But besides nitrates, what else is it good for? Let's say it's Sunday Funday water change day, in my case, and you use this hack and you test your TDS and it's much higher than every other Sunday. Well, let's think. Did you see a sick fish and dose some medication? Did you find a new product and wanted to try it, so you added it to the tank? Did you have a little slip of the wrist and maybe fed too much food 1 or 2 days during the week? TDS is gonna tell you that something changed that week. Something caused you to have more dissolved ions in your tank than usual. If none of the above happened and you're absolutely sure that you didn't change anything all week, you may want to search for a dead fish or dead plants or trapped particles of food somewhere. My point is, keeping track of your TDS, as easy as it is to just stick that meter in the water, it's a great way to quickly tell you that your tank is right on schedule and nothing out of the ordinary has happened. Now, this doesn't mean that you can't ever change a thing or try a new product or add some more fish. No, not at all. It just means that at the beginning of the week, you should take a new base level measurement and expect your end of the week measurement to adjust accordingly. Want to know another great tool that we have in the aquarium hobby? It's the Aqua Builder app, and it's free. Everything from fish compatibility to a social community of fish keepers just like you. But before you go, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you on the other side. Peace.